Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. Owen Fitzgerald and I are back with another Money Talk segment this week, the latest results from Starling and Monzo. And then we take a look at how Square's deal for BNPL player Afterpay is helping to shape our fintech flywheel thesis. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. So how's your summer going, Owen?
Pretty good, yeah. Yeah, I was away last weekend, the weekend just gone for the bank holiday weekend down in West Cork. It was really nice. It was pretty chilled, which was nice. Staying out in the middle of nowhere. No phone reception really, which was great. Doing a bit of reading, time with the kids. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I had that when we were out in Western Galway a few weeks ago. And when we got back, my daughter was like, and I was sitting there on the couch on my phone while they were watching TV, and my daughter was like, Daddy, I wish we didn't have Wi-Fi anywhere. I'm like, you used to watch TV with us. I was like, that was a week. You're watching Henry Danger. It's a good show, but there are other things that I need to be doing.
Yeah, a lot to be said for it though.
I know, there is. And yeah, looking forward to shutting off and hopefully a little bit more before the end of the summer, which is good. Yep. Lots going on the last couple of weeks, things that have come up. And I thought that because things have slowed down and things are quiet, people taking time off, lower flow of email volume coming in, great, can take a little bit more time during the day, like you said, to do things with the kids. Yep. But Starling announcing their results, Monzo announcing their results in the last couple of weeks. And I guess it's that time of year, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, starting with Starling, which after we recorded our last episode a couple of weeks ago, I think it was the very next day or even that night that the results were announced. And shout out to Elaine Dian. I said, listen, we would have covered this 2 weeks ago if the news had come out probably an hour earlier.
Yeah.
Right. But we missed it. So big news coming from Starling. The revenues grew nearly 600% up to 100 million over. Now that was a 16-month period because they extended their fiscal year to get it in line with the right cycle from a 14 million for the previous 12-month period. So that is a big, big jump. Right. And that is them doing very well over the last 16 months. Some of the breakdown of the results here for them, they had 60 million pounds from interest on loans, largely from the government support mechanisms in place in the UK, where Starling was basically given a big chunk of money by the UK government to loan out, and there was a good chunk beyond that were subject to guarantees. Their lending book, obviously, from that grew to a mammoth 2.2 billion from 54 million before that. So that's a big, huge jump.
Yep.
Like I said, 95% of the business loans have that government guarantee. They also have lending relationships with third parties that are growing. So the big jump up in deposits that they had from 1 billion to 5.8 billion, obviously they're lending out to third parties who are then lending it themselves. Right? So that was an interesting one. Their ops costs are up to 113 million pounds for the year. That's fine, but there's an offset coming up from that, which I think is going to be quite interesting. They didn't say what the offset, how much it was, but I'll talk about that in a second. The average SME customer now holds 13,000 pounds in their account. Nice chunky number. And the average retail customer, 2,000 pounds. Now, looking at the Monzo numbers, they didn't say what that was. They may have, actually. I just probably missed it. But it's nowhere near 2,000 pounds average customer deposit at the retail level that a Monzo would have versus a Starling. Starling said they want more SMEs, estimated that they have 6.3% of the UK SME market, but want to ratchet that up to 10. The new products they launched this year, their business toolkit, Starling Connected, which allows you to grant access to your card to others that may be stuck at home. And that was a big thing during the early days of the pandemic. Starling Kite, which is extending Starling usage to your kids, right? Being able to track their spending. And I know that was a big one for Elaine Dian. She was pretty thrilled to see that one go live. USD accounts for SMEs, banking as a service. So this is one that I really like. And this is what I expect, and I don't know what the numbers are, but it's offsetting their operational costs. They developed a great platform. They're offering it out, banking as a service, payment services, account services, and absorbing costs, like I said, like Amazon Web Services, right? So that was AWS came out of. Amazon built a fantastic platform. Can we actually leverage this and use some of these servers during downtime? And no downtime for Starling, but still same idea. Finally, their plans ahead, get Ireland done, right? Be great to see that. Integrate the fleet mortgages biz they bought for 50 million pounds. So that wasn't mentioned in the annual report because the news came afterwards, but it was 4 days later that news came out. that they bought fleet mortgages. They said no to crypto, which I'm not going to pick a fight with Ann Boden on that. But, she's been at least consistent in her view on that. So I thought that was really interesting. The biggest thing coming out of all of this for me was nice to see them doing well. The lending book being up to 2.2 billion. Obviously, that's a huge influx of money coming from the UK government loans, but also the banking as a service, which I think we hinted at a couple of months ago that we saw Anne talking about with Angela Strange, who we'll talk about later. And it's awesome to see them bring that platform to the level where they can offer that out to third parties.
Yeah, it's great to see, and they're doing fantastically well. The really interesting bit, and it's going to be mirrored in the US, because obviously a lot of US businesses on the lending side, likes of Square, which we'll mention later, all benefited from the government support packages. Like Starling have obviously benefited really well, but they're now sticky customers.
Good
because
point.
you've already got them on the book. So
yeah,
the more you can roll out, you're not going to lose those guys. You've guaranteed loans, so there's low risk from Starling's point of view, but you've got the customers.
Yeah,
so
I didn't think of that.
Now it's about upselling to them.
That you do get them on and say, all right, that pump up to 2.2 billion in loan book is an aberration that we probably won't see.
Yeah.
Because of growth, you probably will see another 2 billion jump.
Yeah.
But going from 54 million to 2.2 billion, that percentage bump, I don't think we'll ever see again. But that's a really good point, is that they're now customers.
Exactly. So one way or another, they're in now, and they're in on the lending side, which means, all of the other rollouts, the business toolkit, all of the other benefits that they can add to the SME base, well then, they can easily roll them out.
Okay.
And we'll see it like that. That to me is the big differentiator for them versus Revolut, which we talked about, and obviously Monzo's results that we'll go through in a few minutes. But like the SME thing is going to be their core revenue generator. I think we talked about it. We talked about it the last time we were talking about Revolut, which is their core service that's going to generate the biggest chunk of their revenue. Clearly, the SMEs is the way to go for Starling, I think.
It is. And that's talking about our famous fintech flywheel concept that I think we're going to get into a little bit more tonight, that what I've kind of figured out with that, and it's from reading The Everything Store by Brad Stone, great book, where he talks about Amazon's flywheel, is that what is the one thing that you do really well, right? And how do you then create the momentum from different channels in order to keep doing that one thing incredibly well? For Amazon, it was low prices. And what are all these different things that you can do to make sure that you can lower prices and have some good side effects from that? So in Starling's case, I don't know what that is yet. Is it being really good to SMEs? If you read Ann Boden's book, it didn't start out about offering services to SMEs. It was just, let's build a better bank, right? So that's something to dig further into.
Yeah, but as well as that, there's, we looked at Revolut and we were talking about 10 million customers, and the majority of them we were saying that some of them were directed towards the UK. Like Starling has only got 2.1 million customers, but yet it's saying that it has about 6% of the SME market. That's where the growth is. And we talked about it with Revolut, and it's likely to be easier to be done here from Starling's point of view, is that as they onboard SMEs and build out that part of the business, and then they build up the retail side, being able to provide that integration or that point of sale or that customer connection between SMEs and their customers directly, who are also Starling retail customers, moves other banks out of the equation, and it allows them to then be that direct relationship with their customers, because I can now, whatever I'm paying or buying from an SME through Starling.
That's interesting, because if you think about the 11FS FinTech battlefield, they call it the banking battlefield. Yeah. I've presented this to one of the Pat FinTech cohorts as the FinTech battlefield, and obviously referenced 11FS in that. And I don't have my whiteboard to draw this all out this evening, so I won't get into it in detail, but it's effectively, how do you move up from serving the retail market, where it is a lot of customers and low value, to moving up to the top of the battlefield, where you've got governments, institutions, big corporates, where it's a small number of accounts, but much higher value, right? Yeah. Obviously, you want the accounts that have much higher value, and where you're serving a smaller number of them because it's lower cost, kind of. So I think what you're saying here, Owen, is that plotting this along this fintech battlefield, the sweet spot is not retail customers, right? Because as your relationships with them grow, on average, individuals' wealth appreciation and the size of their bank account balances may grow moderately over time, but not to the extent that a smaller number of customers that happen to be SMEs that may become mid-sized corporations or bigger corporations over time. And so that stickiness with the SMEs, I think that's something to really build on. I think I'm repeating what you're saying, but listening to you has allowed me to put it now into my own words.
I just think, I mean, look, you look at the numbers there. The average SME customer, 13,000 versus 2,000 for the retail customer. You know, it's more valuable, obviously, but bigger than that. If you think, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head in terms of how many SMEs are in the UK market alone, but the reality is the majority of those would be in the smaller scheme of things.
They would be.
You know, and everyone knows, like, by going in, I know the coffee I buy locally or whatever, I'll tap my Revolut or whatever, but if I knew that I could pay it, you know, if they then don't need a payment terminal necessarily because I can pay with my Starling account to their Starling account within the app or within the wider ecosystem, well, then that's just easier for them, and all of it flows through Starling.
Absolutely.
Which then allows for further personalization for the retail customer and more valuable data and a more valuable relationship for the SME.
Loyalty programs, so on and so forth, stickier relationship. I think there is something here, which is this B2C to B2B crossover point that we'll talk about in a minute that gets the momentum going on the flywheel. I hadn't thought about it much until tonight when I was thinking deeply about this a couple hours ago.
And I think it's fascinating, and hopefully over the course of, I've mentioned to you before, I'm hoping to go back to do a PhD now part-time in September on future business models in banking, financial services. I think a really interesting comparison between side by side of Starling, Monzo and Revolut in terms of their approaches, the direction they're taking, the products they're rolling out, and it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out, because clearly Revolut is going more retail focused.
Yep, absolutely.
Starling is SME focused. Monzo appears to be, as we discuss now in a minute, kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, well, I'd love to see where you get going with some of your studies and analysis on this, right? New banking models compared to old school, and the technology enablement of this, and where but being able to get this fluidity between your individual customer accounts at the retail level, your SME accounts, your lending products, your savings products, your spending options, and being able to do this all within one tech platform with easy onboarding. Forget about it when you think about a traditional bank, right? I go into Bank of Ireland, this was years ago, and I think it's still the same, but I was going in looking to get approval for a mortgage, and they needed my bank account information in order to analyze it. They're like, can you provide me with your bank statement? Like, you have my current account.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, but we don't have access to it. It's a different system.
Yeah,
I said, okay, so I'm not going to open a mortgage with you. There's clearly no benefit.
Yeah.
Right. And I went with somebody else. But
I did that. That happened to me recently, applying for mortgage with Permanent TSB, where I'm a customer, and I had to print out 12 months bank statements for my own local branch.
That's awesome.
But I had to go into the branch to print them out to then hand them back to them. Like, it's just stupid.
It's so backwards. But, we're a small country of 5 million people, and that's okay. We need another banking option here in Ireland, and I will leave it at that.
Yeah. So Monzo's next, and this is an interesting one relative to what we just talked about, but also because, and I've said it before on this show, I think it's going to be the one that's going to be acquired. I think we're going to find reasons why as we're going through it now.
I think you're right. So let's hit the numbers here. £114 million annual loss and a second going concern warning. So this was sifted on the 30th of July. So the revenue up, they did okay, right? Went from 48 million up to 67 million. Good growth to continue to see for a fintech in Series E, Series F, wherever they are. The loss, however, more than doubled from 47 million to 114 million. And, in Revolut terms, who cares, right? Because you're spending more to make more. Customers up 1.6 million to 4 million. Good. Deposits up 1 billion to 1.4 billion. Okay. Customer spend up 7 billion. Good for the interchange, obviously, but crappy because they're a UK player with 0.3% interchange instead of 1.7 to 2% in the US, which is attractive for them. The savings marketplace, which is new for them, was up 600 million to 800 million. So great new-ish product in allowing people to get some real good savings options through connecting with different providers. Their NPS score, Net Promoter Score, was down 5 to 75. But I looked at this tonight. Above 50 for an NPS is excellent. Above 80 is world-class, right? So they're already pretty much up there. They're doing okay. Not a good lending model. I will leave it at that. No, I won't. I will go on. It's restricted now. 24 million in interest income offset by 20 million in credit losses. Now, pandemic being what it is, that's understandable. But I think it was even the year before where there were big question marks on the risk that they were
And the
eating.
defaults. I remember we talked
on the
about their defaults rate being quite high.
For 2019. They're not getting that right. It said in their financial statements, results, and their annual report, it said, we've restricted our lending program. I'm like, good. Get it sorted out.
good.
The statement within the financials, the directors recognize there are material uncertainties that cast significant doubt upon the group's ability to continue as a going concern. Okay. Last year when they said that, they said we kind of had to say that. Now they're saying it again. We kind of have to say that. Like, how many years are you going to keep saying that until it's actually a problem? New products and features. Didn't know about some of these. A salary sorter, nice. Bill pots, great. Get paid early. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Loans, overdrafts, not good. Energy switching and savings marketplace, good. Those are nice features. New things coming. They weren't so encouraging. More premium products where they want you to pay for stuff. Good. Get more at home and abroad. That was a bit nebulous. Monzo business. Now they got 3,000 customers now on their beta compared to, I forget how many business customers that Starling had, but Starling are obviously way ahead of Monzo on that front. Their U.S. business, they filed for a U.S. banking charter, obviously going for that interchange at 2% compared to the 0.3% UK and Europe. So more going on there, but I still just, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing Monzo more than a charity in the UK.
It's an interesting one because actually, as you were going through it there, my view is here that like it doesn't stand out enough. It's not Starling, it's not focused on, the core bit of the SME side, and then it's not doing the numbers that Revolut are doing at the scale that Revolut is doing it. So what is it? But then as you were going through it, the one thing I jotted down was that I wrote down the word fanatics, and we talked about it when we were talking about Square before, is that Monzo customers really like being Monzo customers way more than than you hear people being Revolut customers. It's very much a thing, and people get a lot of kind of value out of it. And look, they have 4 million customers. They have a decent business, and those 4 million customers all really want to be their customers. So there's certainly a lot of value in that, which plays into some of the stuff we're seeing in the US, and we talk about in the US and we talk about Square, where they have that kind of brand to them. You see it on a bigger scale with the Teslas and stuff like that, but obviously people really want to be and are proud to be Monzo customers. But I'm not sure that they're turning that into a good business then.
No, and we talked last time about Robinhood's fan base, right? There's 17 million customers. They're 32 million daily newsletter readers. They're 40 million podcast downloads. Okay, that speaks community to me. And I don't think that Monzo have a podcast, but who cares? Podcasts are podcasts, right? Yeah. And their newsletter, don't know about what that might be either, but say they have one, great. But how are they actually getting people behind their business, getting people behind their product?
Yeah.
I still think it's just a UK phenomenon, right? They were one of the first ones to really come out there and say, hey, we're cool, we're new.
Had the cool colored
love
card,
us. Exactly. And I think...
I don't think they know what they are, but they have customers who want to be their customers, but I'm not sure they know what their particular niche or their particular angle is, other than being an interesting alternative to a UK bank.
Yeah.
Which to me means that they're going to get acquired by a UK bank. More than
You think so?
Yeah, like with 4 million customers and, 1.4 billion on deposits, there's something worth acquiring, especially at the rate they're going. I mean, this is what the second year of going concern. Losses have doubled. They're not going in the right direction. Revolut is raising tons of money. It'll continue to fund the losses. Starling is profitable now and looks like it'll continue to be. Monzo is neither of those, so it's more than likely going to end up needing to be acquired. So there's a decent business. I just don't know who'll acquire it.
If you look at, the UK high street banks, anyone that acquires this will kill it.
Yeah, I know.
And what you're doing is you're taking that 1.4 billion and probably cutting it in at least half by the fact that no one wants to go be a NatWest customer again. Nothing against NatWest.
Yeah.
Right? So
who does that leave then?
I think it's perhaps a private equity funded merger, say of someone like an Oak North.
Yeah, Oak North is heavy on the SME side. They could integrate something like that.
I don't think Starling would ever buy Monzo.
No.
I mean, Tom's gone, so we'll see, but it's not, it wouldn't be a good marriage.
For what they'd have to pay for it, I think they'd get there on their own.
They would. You're absolutely right. They would, whatever revenue levels that, they may want to attain in the next 3 to 5 years. and whatever Monzo could attain in the next 3 to 5 years, I'd say with a little bit of extra funding, Starling could achieve the same result without buying Monzo.
Yeah. It strikes me as, someone who's specifically focused on the UK market is likely to be the acquirer. So I liked your suggestion around the Oak Norths of the world, or someone where it's a useful add-on to something they're already doing. But I don't see why a international tech firm, for example, would acquire them just to have customers in the UK.
Well, in looking at Revolut now offering travel
Yep.
services, right?
Yeah.
That was announced just a couple of weeks ago after
Yep.
we talked about Revolut the last time. And we had talked about that a good year ago because Revolut mentioned it. And could it go the other way, right? Could a TripAdvisor pony up and say, hey, we're going to buy a Monzo? Now, that's kind of nonsensical because TripAdvisor are a global company. Why would they want all these banking customers in the UK? Or would it be just, hey, the first move to say, well, a travel company buying small challenger banks in different countries, right? Because there's several in Australia, right? There's a number in France. There's a number in the other countries around Europe.
Maybe actually on that sort of example, it's more likely to be like a Booking.com, which might be a better fit, where it makes a lot of sense for them to offer more financial services, going a bit beyond the TripAdvisor.
Just the fact that we're struggling with this, Owen, makes me think it's a little bit hopeless.
Yeah, it'll be like, I think the next 12 months for them will be crucial, especially at the rate that obviously Revolut continues to attack and then Starling continues to be profitable and head towards that IPO. Everyone's going to be looking at Monzo saying, well, what are you guys doing?
They're still
I can't
burning
see
cash.
the US isn't going to make much sense for them if Revolut can't get there. They're way behind on the business side. Business banking. So they've some interesting features. The get paid early bit is a really interesting feature. They're seeing more and more of that being rolled out in the US in particular. And it makes a lot of sense.
But isn't that something easy for a Revolut or a Starling to copy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I mean. It's an interesting feature, but there's nothing there that makes them stand out to me. Would an interesting acquisition play be someone in the banking as a service space acquiring them?
Perhaps. Now, good point. Knowing some of the heritage of Monzo with folks like Jason Bates, who are now at 11FS, and seeing what 11FS are doing with their Foundry product, which is basically this intelligent services layer that sits on top of a banking as a service platform, and start bringing some of that knowledge and empowerment into the hands of traditional financial players. And if a banking as a service player wanted to go one step further and actually be able to provide nearly everything but the brand and be able to do so a lot better than other banking as a service players. I'm thinking Solaris Bank. Obviously, they just bought Qantas, I think. You get even smarter. You get even smarter with banking as a service, and you do it with Monzo. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I think that could be something interesting.
Because
maybe it is Solaris Bank.
Yeah, there's your shop window. You're able to deploy all of your other solutions that you offer within your existing customer base to be able to demonstrate how well it works to other potential customers that you're trying to roll it out to.
Yep. Okay, I think you're onto something. I've got a few folks that we could bring onto the show to ask about this, to see what they think. People specifically playing in the banking as a service market. Next story, and this was the big one that I got the most excited about. And it's crazy. Like I mentioned 11FS and Simon Taylor, shout out to Simon. He mentioned something in his FinTech Brain Food newsletter that was helpful to me tonight. And when I was doing some work with 11FS back in 2018, I just remember Simon Taylor's bromance with Jack Dorsey, right? He just loved Jack Dorsey. But anyway, I feel like I'm now seeing that excitement that Simon had about Jack Dorsey. And it wasn't just about his beard. I remember when Cash App launched and Simon got all excited about that. And I wonder what Simon was thinking back then as to how far Square could actually take this business. So, big news. They are paying $29 billion to buy the buy now, pay later player, Afterpay or BNPL. And their Afterpay are in the Australian market. They have 16 million active consumer accounts and also 98,000 active merchants. I think Klarna, who are the biggest BNPL player, have something to the effect of 250 to 300,000 merchants. So Afterpay are doing pretty good to build it up, primarily in Australia and Asia Pac. So Square is easily headed towards $4 billion in revenue in 2021. It's 50-50 between Cash App and Seller. Seller is their payment services business, and they will add on Afterpay's $700 million in projected annual revenue. Okay. So one of the first observations on this, Owen, from me was from reading the A16Z newsletter that just came out last week, their fintech newsletter. Angela Strange wrote about this, and to quote her, she said, neobanks have leveraged inflection points, a trigger event in a person's life, whether it's a milestone, say a graduation, a point in time, like immigrating to the US, or even a micro moment, i.e. making a first huge purchase, right? To reduce the cost of customer acquisition by targeting a particular type of user at a particular time when they are more likely to change their banking services, right? So say, let's break down some of that. So a milestone in your life where you may change your banking provider. SoFi provides student loans out of the US. They also provide current accounts now, right? So you get a little bit closer because you're starting to pay back your student loans. You get a deal, switch your current account over here, and we'll make it easier for you to pay back your loans. Great. Point in time, immigrating to the US. How to look today, Majority are a new player in the US. They're an all-in-one mobile bank for migrants, okay? You're moving to the US, you're going to open a Majority account, right? Because they make it really easier for migrants that may not have all the right Social Security numbers and, banking records or utility bills, those types of things to be able to open up a bank account. The micro moment, making a big purchase or making any purchase, just to take a look at that. So say you start using Afterpay to go buy your big first TV after college, right? To put in your brand new swanky apartment that you got because you've got a big fat huge student loan from MIT that got you a big fat huge job at some investment bank or whatever, right? So you go to buy that TV, you don't have any money yet, you use Afterpay. And because you're using Afterpay, they say, listen, we're going to make it real easy for you to start paying this back if you have Cash App. Yep. So you open up a Cash App account and you end up using their spending, savings, investing products. Okay. So taking advantage of these life change moments is what Angela Strange was talking about as bringing on board new customers at a lower cost of acquisition. And this, I think, is just one of the first plain as day observations out of Square's acquisition of Afterpay, and that nice little symmetry between Afterpay and Cash App. I think that is just step one with all of this, though.
Yeah.
No,
look, it was a fascinating one because, like I said, I was away at the weekend, very little internet, but it was the one thing that when I spotted it, I was out getting a coffee and I wanted to tweet it and copy and tagged you in it or whatever, because specifically to me, to your point there, it's that flywheel piece. It's, they paid a lot of money for a product or a feature, whatever way you want to describe it, BNPL, for something they could have built themselves and rolled out themselves, but they weren't. They were acquiring the customer base, especially the 100,000 merchants. Because like you said, it's okay, you're getting them into that Square ecosystem. And there's huge potential there. We talked about it recently with the kind of Tidal deal and the creator piece that they were looking at, that kind of creator market they were looking to focus on, the rollout of their SME banking. So they're capturing everything on both sides because they're bringing in the 100,000 merchants into the Square ecosystem where they can offer them all sorts of different products and features, which then, allows Afterpay to offer further products ultimately to its customer base. And all of a sudden you've got more people using the Square ecosystem. You've got Cash App, which could very easily then be rolled out into the Australian market to the consumers using the Afterpay product. Yep. On the other side, I think it's a fascinating one to watch. I think more than most. And I say more than most on the basis that, we don't look closely at the likes of a Nubank or a Tinkoff or any of these others because they're in markets that people are not as aware of. But I think Square is the one out there really setting the trend, setting the kind of stage for what is going to come in terms of future business models on the banking side. And look, all about what they're doing on the crypto side specifically, but I just think, and that's before we even mention the fact that they deployed a lot of the government support, both the loans to businesses in the US, which we referred to earlier with Starling, and also the actual deployment of I don't know what it's called in the US, but the equivalent of the pandemic payment to people. So, they have sticky customers on both sides of it.
The stimmy checks,
they
call them.
That all went on to Robinhood.
Yeah, thanks Joe Biden.
So I just think it's picking up customers on everywhere it turns, and it's bringing more people into from a consumer to the merchant side and bringing them all together in one big flywheel, as we like to call it.
Yeah, the F word. And I kind of dug into this a bit and looked a bit more at this, and to set the scene, just, I know we've talked about flywheel before. We talked about it from a Disney perspective, but I've gone a bit deeper. And I think you need to figure out, what are you uniquely good at? Like I said, right? What is the thing that you're really good at? Disney is delighting kids. Whether you're a 5-year-old kid watching some animated movie, or you're, my age watching Star Wars.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is that delight, and it's an age-old model. It works. Producing the content, operating the theme parks, and selling merch, right? And keeping that flywheel going. Amazon are very good at low prices. And there is a self-sustaining revenue wheel, business wheel, that keeps turning with each point, impacting that further and further. Shopify, another one, help merchants sell more. That one's a bit more complicated. But by looking at the Amazon and Shopify ones, I've had a bit of a realization here about what can drive this a little bit differently than Disney's. So first thing, right? Does it increase your TAM? And I think that's big. Does that increase your total addressable market? For Disney, absolutely. The market that you can address by producing content is significantly increased by theme parks and theme park revenue, right? You're increasing your total addressable market by then selling merch, right? Does it make sense that users will complete the circle? If you go to a theme park, will you buy merch? Yeah. If you go buy merch, will you go home and watch a movie? Yeah. If you go home and watch a movie, will you want to go back to the theme park? Probably, right? So users will complete the circle, and will they complete the circle at any point that they step on the flywheel? Yeah, I think the answer for Disney is yes. The fourth one is this B2B and B2C crossover point that Amazon have, that Shopify now have, that Square, I think, now have. And, again, thinking of Star Wars, it's like, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. I'm a flywheel like Amazon before me. And I was thinking about this from a Disney perspective. Do they have a B2C and B2B crossover? I think they do, but it's not very pronounced in their flywheel, right? Because their main interest in terms of how they make money is at the consumer level. But they have this integration with toy manufacturers, with construction, with service, with catering, with hotel operators. All that's there, right? The whole movie industry, everything. So I think that is an important point here. And it's allowing me to see that when you can bring consumers to businesses, and you can bring businesses to consumers and do so through technology, you're really onto something. And that's what I see Square doing here. And we can talk about how I think their flywheel developing in a minute.
And look, the Shopify one is a really good example. I've been listening to a few podcasts about that business model. Like, it's interesting because the CEO, he refers to Amazon and the everything store, but he talks about Shopify being the entrepreneur store, whereby they're making it easy for someone to set up a business online, selling whatever. So once they get them doing that, then they keep them in their ecosystem by providing all of the products and services needed for those people to run their business. And again, it's keeping them within that ecosystem so they can deploy more types of products to the retailers. And again, these are generally very small businesses, but more and more of them, and the scale of the internet and everything. And it's targeting a different customer, but it's similar in sorts to Stripe then as well. And they're 1% of the GDP of the internet, and the growth there. And we talked about them before, targeting the SME internet businesses and scaling with them as they scale, and being able to then bring in like Stripe Radar for ID&V and things like that, and more kind of products and features as those companies grow, which leads them coming back to the next product Stripe rollout.
Yep.
Shopify is probably a bit more, or is that combination of the B2B and B2C side maybe more so than Stripe would be?
Yeah, I think it is. I think Shopify definitely are, especially with their Shop Pay now, where you're making it easier for people to spend money, where they've already made it easier for consumers to find businesses online. They made it easier for businesses to earn revenue, right? So it's that interplay of the buy side and the sell side that I think is critically important to how some of these post-Disney flywheels have developed, right? So Amazon's is very easy, and this was in the Everything Store book, right? By Brad Stone. I think back in the 90s, and Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, he was talking about it there. And I think in the same way that probably in the 70s and 80s, people were saying your sales machine is a funnel, right? And here's how it works. That, it's consultant speak for being able to look at, hey, do you do one thing well, and how can you build a self-reinforcing sales cycle, right? So Amazon's very simple. Lower prices lead to more customer visits, right? And Prime pushed that even more by giving away that free 2-day, not giving away, but initially making a loss on their shipping. So you get more customers on, you increase the volume of sales, you attract more commission-paying third-party sellers to the site, because third-party sellers know that if they want to sell more products, well, you put it up on Amazon, right? You get more third-party sellers, enabled Amazon to get more out of their fixed costs, like the fulfillment centers, the servers needed to run the website. And eventually what came out of that was AWS saying, we built this great platform. Let's see if, and we can leverage that for others. Greater efficiency then enabled Amazon to lower prices again, because they were making more money off their fixed costs. They lower prices, they get more customer visits, and it goes around and around and around. Right? So Jeff Bezos read Good to Great in 2000 and made his entire executive team read it. And I think their consultants they had on board at that time wanted to start talking about it, and Bezos was like, no, it's our secret sauce for now, but we'll put it in the book 15 years later.
Yeah.
So looking at the Square one that I think is developing here, Owen, first step, get businesses to use the Square payment system. Right? It's that terminal and then all of the software that goes around that for inventory and other things like that, right? And build your payment volume. The more payment volume you get, the easier it is to lure businesses and creators, that's important with the title acquisition, away from banks with Square Banking, okay? Which is one of their newer products that we talked about a couple of weeks ago that gives you the checking accounts, debit cards, the savings accounts, loans, and that connects them directly to the merchant sales and payments through Square. Right? So you do the payment terminal, the payment products, you then have a banking account, you get that even quicker pass through, probably even quicker access to liquidity because they can see your spending and see what you're earning in real time through your shops, okay? And you have many, many shops all together, networked together on this one platform. That's pretty good. So if you enable increased spending at merchants with Afterpay and with integrating that, you're increasing the payment flow and the Square banking usage, which I think they're building out further by building this competency in Bitcoin. And it's not just Bitcoin to understand it technologically, it's to hold it as a treasury asset. Because if you hold it as a treasury asset and you can manage that, then you can more effectively accept Bitcoin as payment or enable the merchants on your network to accept Bitcoin as a payment because you have a store of it yourself that you can help them to manage the risk of it with, right? You can then obviously then attract people who want to pay in Bitcoin. So I think that is one step of even digging deeper. The next step, bring more consumers to merchants with Cash App and Afterpay integration. That is the crossover point of B2B to B2C, okay? So, the first few steps here, getting businesses to use a Square payment system, getting more of that payment volume to get businesses to open the business checking accounts, the Square banking. You enable increased spending at the merchants with Afterpay. Again, B2B service, enabling merchants to offer Afterpay, and then you're bringing more consumers in, right? Now that you've got that integration between Afterpay and Cash App, you then have Afterpay luring more businesses to use a Square payment system, right? So if that's the final step, you're bringing consumers in. They all want to use Afterpay. More merchants see that. They want to use Afterpay. They want to offer it, so they get enabled to offer their shoppers Afterpay. And then you're back to the beginning. Get businesses to use a Square payment if they're, if all they want is Afterpay. Well, let's use the Square payment systems, it's seller as they call it. So in a roundabout, long-winded way, I think that is the beginnings of this Square flywheel, and I see a lot of reinforcing points that they can introduce along this, and it to me it personifies this B2B to B2C crossover point that screams of marketplace, that screams of network effects. Yeah. But I think it's just a early shot across the bow, or even a shot directly into the bow by Square as representative of the fintech and digital finance community towards traditional banking, who are just at complete risk. It's not going to be quick. It won't be pretty either, but it's not going to be quick.
And I see your point here that you'd written down around the acquisition side. I think it'll be really interesting to watch the acquisitions in the next kind of 12 to 18 months. No doubt there'll be more consolidation in the BNPL space. Again, others trying to acquire that customer base to then, because we talked about it when we looked at Klarna, I think a few weeks back, and we were talking about their results, and we were wondering, okay, well, where did they go from there? They've all these customers, 30 million customers or whatever they had. They need to now integrate themselves further up the supply chain. But actually what will likely happen in this particular space is that the acquisitions will be to acquire those merchants or those consumers at the end to integrate your own solutions, like what Square are doing here. But it'll be really interesting to see now in relation to even Shopify and Stripe as to where do the acquisitions go in the future in terms of accelerating that value and closing that loop for them.
I think we've got a model to predict this, Owen, right?
We might have.
That I think this B2C and B2B crossover point, this bridge, because Square are not just buying Afterpay here, they're buying the bridge, right? And I was struggling at the beginning of looking at this to say, what is the flywheel here? How do we have this self-reinforcing, momentum-gaining spinning of this sales wheel? And when I looked at Amazon, when I looked at Shopify, and I saw clearly that B2B to B2C bridge standing out in both of their flywheels, which have been incredibly successful, I then saw where it fit into Square. So if you plot any of these players intelligently and think about what could be their B2B to B2C crossover point, how could that create a self-sustaining spin of a flywheel? I think you can project where the acquisitions are going to be, and perhaps even for our junior investment banker friends out there, even propose investment banking projects for, to pursue, to try to marry up, like we said, a Monzo and an Oak North. So
watch this space.
Watch this space. Yeah, it all needs to be put down. I think that there's some developing components of this venture fund thesis I'm working on, Owen, that flywheel obviously plays a big part of that, but also this fintech battlefield, I think, is a key component of it as well.
Yeah.
And it all fits together quite nicely. I need one more because it's a rule of 3 here. So we'll get our thinking caps on that.
Yeah.
Any other stories that jumped out at you this week that you thought were interesting?
No, well, there was 2 actually. One, we kind of touched on it, was the Revolut announcement, because I think when we talked about it last year, we wondered where would they go next, and I think I don't even think it was Revolut. I think it was someone even just tweeted about, in the travel space, and we thought, it was going into new areas and then reversing their product set into that space, and we looked at them acquiring a travel company. But obviously what they've launched is a feature called Stays, which allows users to book hotels and other accommodation through its app. And it's their challenge to the likes of Booking.com and TripAdvisor. And again, further kind of focuses them on becoming a super app. So that was a really interesting one, because the customers get 10% back on bookings made through Revolut. And again, you have 10 million customers. It's going to start taking a bit of business away from the Bookings.com and the TripAdvisors when you can get far more to it. Because again, like, some of those businesses should probably be offering more in the financial services space.
Yeah, they should.
And obviously Revolut is trying to do that. And particularly Revolut, it's a good fit for them given their, I suppose, experience in the foreign exchange space, which was their kind of bread and butter at the start. So it's an area they should know pretty well. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, I suppose it was strange that they were rolling it out and not partnering. But
that's interesting, because if you did do it with a TripAdvisor, right, a TripAdvisor would say, what fintech would I want to look to for banking as a service type features to be able to integrate financial services, payments at the very least, into my travel app? And all of them, obviously, like you said, are, you could pay through Stripe, but can you get a bit more intelligent with that and move into e-money institution territory, which I won't even get into. And, because you can take deposits that way. And once you start getting into that territory of what bank would it be, it wouldn't be Monzo, because they're pretty much single currency right now, right? Starling, they, doing a little bit more on the currency side, but the kings of currency are Revolut. So we've kind of, like you said, backed into this in that maybe there is a bank as a service feature that Revolut could develop here, based upon their developing this capability around the travel side of things, that they could then offer out as another product. That would be good to see. I think a couple of weeks ago, we tried to talk through what might be Revolut's flywheel, and it just ends up being where you take the sales funnel and you make it round instead of a straight pipe. Because it's saying, what's the one thing they do well? They do FX really well. Okay, so I think playing on that, what are the pieces of the business that they can add on, pieces of a wider future business that they can add on that would start getting them towards being really, really good at FX, but being able to do that in many different ways and perhaps get that B2C to B2B crossover point with FX, which would be interesting.
And the other interesting angle here is by going down this kind of adjacent route, I talked about the last time when we talked about Revolut's results and the fact that a third of their revenue comes from subscriptions. So this feature is rolling out in the UK, for example, and it's only going to be accommodation, and then eventually it'll include flights, car hire, etc. But being able to offer those on a subscription basis, could be really interesting, depending on the amount of travel. So I'm going to pay X amount per month, and on that basis, then I get, I'll get a certain amount of travel in that year or whatever. and I can
Yeah.
add to those packages. And it's an entirely different way of continuing to fund, because would I pay an extra 20 quid a month to know that I could take a certain amount of flights a year? Yeah, I probably would.
It's like
Yeah.
Amazon Prime, but for people, not
Yeah.
products. You're shipping people.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
like,
interesting. You
yeah.
could do that. You can get into this low price territory that Amazon are clearly playing in and do that with FX and travel.
Because I've seen, like, obviously Scott Galloway has some great views on Apple and where that needs to go and its recurring revenue bundle. And, would people pay more per month to subscribe to Apple if it meant that they didn't have to pay a lump sum to buy the latest iPhone? Yeah, they
Yeah.
probably would. So
Absolutely,
would I pay 50 quid a month to Revolut to get some flights and car hire and other things if that was the particular thing that I use a lot per year? Yeah, I probably would. To not then have to pay for it in a lump sum.
It's car leasing. It's the car leasing model,
Yeah.
right? Which is a dealer goes and buys a bunch of cars and then they don't sell them. They lease them out and then you give the opportunity to hand it back in, or, you can buy yourself out or do whatever. You start doing that with phones. You open up a whole new industry for phone dealers that are buying in bulk and then leasing and doing things differently, packaging that up with a Vodafone or, mobile carrier, Wi-Fi business, whatever. Yeah, there's a lot to explore there. Jesus. The more we talk, the more
deeper we go into these rabbit holes.
The deeper we go, absolutely.
And do you know what? And just to throw another one into the mix, which is probably worth considering, I was looking at a report this week. It was in Tearsheet, which is a kind of newsletter that I subscribe to.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. But that the latest eMarketer report that came out has, and see if you can guess this one, which app accounts for more payments in the US than Google and Samsung Pay? So Apple Pay is number one, 43.9 million users. Who's second with 31 million?
Walmart.
No, you're on the right track though. Starbucks.
Yeah.
Very,
I knew Walmart Pay was pretty big, but not surprised.
So
Starbucks.
Starbucks, the second most used mobile payment app for point of sale transactions in the US.
Everyone's buying coffee. Everyone's getting loyalty points. Everyone's getting free coffee.
Yeah.
Or you load up the card, right?
That then becomes an interesting one from their point of view as to what do they want to do then with that customer base and that payments usage every year. Yeah.
Yeah. Surprised nothing has happened on that yet. I'm sure this is making its way around the innovation labs of America right now and say, oh, let's look at what Starbucks doing. Can we copy that and do that with, banking?
Or the other question is, why aren't Starbucks doing more? Because, I mean, what do they do? You load up your card. What are you paying? You're just paying for your coffee. Like, I know Starbucks obviously have access to that funding then, and the majority of it, or a portion of it, is never used. But you'd wonder, why aren't they doing more? Because I get my Starbucks coffee, my ground beans down in Tesco for $5 or whatever, and I bring them home and I grind them, and then I make my Starbucks coffee here in the house. But surely through my card, if I had one, I could pay a subscription fee again and get that delivered, or partner with someone who'll then deliver it to me.
Well, that's what I do. And shout out to the guys at Moi Coffee. So I just received my August subscription package and from Moi Coffee, and that lasts about 3.5 weeks, right? Rather than 4 weeks. So, I don't need to get 2 bags yet, but I'm happy to start paying for my coffee as a subscription. And I'm thrilled to do that because there's a global impact from Moi Coffee that I can get behind.
Yeah.
So.
Like, I mean, we've talked about it before with other examples like WhatsApp and stuff like that. But when you have a large customer base, then there are constantly opportunities to monetize them.
Yep. It's that online community.
Yep.
And all you need is your first 2,000. That's the number that the token sales on Telegram focus on. Can we get to our first 2,000 in this community? And then you start to monetize that.
And maybe what we'll see happen is Starbucks will start rolling out coffee machines and there'll be a buy now, pay later option.
Ooh. There you go.
Just to finish that circle of ours from today's conversations.
Yeah, and probably with a cup of coffee to keep me going a little bit while longer tonight as well.
Yeah. Oh, actually, randomly, as I was researching buy now, pay later, hazard a guess as to who kind of brought out this innovation. Which US company in the mid 1800s was the innovative company behind rolling out the first version of buy now, pay later?
Was it Sears?
No, it was not. It was Singer Sewing Machines, or the Singer Corporation, which make the sewing machines.
Okay. Because there was a concept back when I was a kid called layaway.
Yeah.
Right? Where you bought it. You didn't get it. It was...
Yeah, you put money aside.
Buy now, pay later, get later.
Get later, yeah.
I think Sears were pretty good at that, or others were pretty good at that.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Singer, yeah.
bullet of knowledge tonight.
You are incredibly helpful as always, Mr. Fitzgerald. Should we leave it there?
I think we leave it there.
We'll leave it there with the.
Oh Jesus! I have 1% on my battery. Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up there quickly.
We will wrap it up there with the end of your battery, and we will say goodnight, adios, hava nagila, whatever. That does it for this week, folks. You can learn more about the stories we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. So check us out online and subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter as well. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm the founding partner at Norio Ventures, and I'm an early stage startup advisor and investor helping fintech and digital asset startups get their products to market, build traction with customers, and raise funding. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, get in touch at pete@norioventures.com. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.